What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new features in the iOS 27 public beta. We're also going to talk about how Apple just closed an iPhone loophole and people are upset about it, updates on the iPhone Ultra and the next iPad mini, Apple just raised prices for even more services this week, a crazy AirTag story, and more. So let's start off by talking about the iOS 27 public beta, which did just launch this week. So if you are somebody who likes to do the public betas instead of the developer betas, this week was great for you because we got our very first one. Now, this was the same build as developer beta 3. So if you were on the developer betas, you would not have seen an update. Usually there is an update to match up the build numbers, but this time for some reason, that was not the case. We just got the iOS 27 public beta. And you can see the size here was pretty large, of course, depending on the version you are coming from. And of course, since it is the same build number as developer beta 3, there were absolutely no new changes in this update. It was just the beta 3 for public beta testers. But there are some additional features I wanted to talk about in iOS 27 that I have not yet discussed. And the first one is a really awesome one inside of the wallet application if you have an Apple Card like I do right here. So you can see my Apple Card is right here. If we tap on these three dots, we have a recurring section up here. And this is very intuitive because it's going to show you all of your upcoming recurring charges. So your monthly payments, it's going to show them not only in a list view down here, but also on a calendar with the amount underneath of it for which day that amount is going to come out of your account. This is amazing. This actually opened my eyes as well to some of my expenses and how much I'm spending on a monthly basis right here. So you can see for July, it grays out everything beforehand. And we can see here on the 17th, I have $136 coming out today. And you can see down here, if we look down at upcoming, it shows my utility bill is expected today. And it actually did come today. And you can see on Sunday, we're going to have Epidemic Sound. And then on Monday, we're going to have my YouTube Premium come out. So it shows all that right there in both views, which is really cool. And if you go to all right here, if you change it to all, it will show all of your upcoming transactions that are recurring. And it shows exactly when those charges are expected to hit your accounts. And if we swipe over to go to August, you can see what it's looking like for August as well. So you can see on a month by month basis, when these charges are going to come out. So this is great if you want to really just be in the know of when your recurring charges are coming up. You can also tap on it down here where you see the transaction right here. It shows recurring, it shows the recent transactions, and you can also mark it as not recurring if it's not a recurring transaction. So you can see all that right there, which is really neat. There's also a change in iOS 27. If you put your device in landscape mode and put it in the standby mode, it now shows the Siri orb right in the middle. Before, it would just show it up as a small, little microphone indicator. Now it actually shows the full orb right there. Now there's also a bug in this latest beta, the public beta and developer beta 3, for those who have a different language other than English. So shout out to these people on Reddit who found this. I saw a lot of my viewers saying this as well, but basically the notification placeholder will display English, even though the system language is set to another language like German, for example. So you'll get mixed languages in there for notification badges. And of course, another bug that's going on right now is this annoying keyboard bug where it just shows these question mark characters when you go to paste. So there are actually multiple variations of this. I've seen like 3 different variations of this being bugged in the keyboard. But if you are seeing that, just know that when you reboot your device, it will be fixed. So it's fixed on this device. This is just a screenshot. But if you're seeing those characters right there, that is a known issue. Apple actually has it in the release notes. You just need to reboot your device and it will go back to normal. And also, if you guys remember last week, I talked about how Siri is now able to access some third-party applications, such as your cars. Like for Tesla, for example, you can ask your battery percentage and it will go into the Tesla app and tell you your battery percentage of your car. Now, I've tried that pretty much every single day since this beta has been out, and I have not been able to get that to work. So it seems to be hit or miss. Maybe it just isn't working for everybody as of yet. And I've also had a lot of people ask me, when is Siri AI going to be able to go into third-party applications like Gmail, like, Outlook, or if they have another email provider for personal contacts? Because as of right now, Apple can only read information that's in your, default mail application. And the answer to that is when 27 rolls out officially, the developers will have to update their apps to allow Siri to go in and access that information. So I would not expect, personal context features, to work for third-party applications until iOS 27 officially launches in September. Now, there are going to be exceptions like we see with Tesla here and other applications like that that may work during the beta stages. They may push out this update early, but just know for most most, it's going to be in September, especially if you're wanting to get like the personal context and things like that. And I also have to say that the comments about Siri indexing have fallen to pretty much zero now on my video. So I'm able to use my videos in the comment section as really a good gauge to see, the experience overall. And I've noticed that pretty much nobody anymore talks about indexing. So it seems like the indexing feature was really just an issue on beta 1 and maybe beta 2, but mostly with beta 1. And now every time we install a new update, it seems to be done relatively quickly, which is also great news. Now, I do also want to give an update on the Siri AI on the Apple Watch with watchOS 27 beta 3 or watchOS 27 public beta. And I have to say, it is not great. Like I've said this before, but it is by far the worst OS this year for the betas. I am constantly not getting notifications on my watch. Siri is super buggy. Sometimes my timers won't even work. So it's just really a mess, which is kind of surprising, honestly, because 27 has been so great on every other platform, the iPhone, the Mac, everything, Apple TV, but it's just abysmal for some reason on the Apple Watch. So I'm really hoping that gets better. And you guys let me know as well. Is it really running bad for you as well, on your watch? Let me know, please. And we'll talk more about the performance, the battery life, and when to expect that next beta later on in this video. But let's switch over to some of the latest news from this week. And we're going to start with Apple being sued over the reported hide my email flaw. So if you guys remember in last week's episode of Apple Weekly, we talked about how there's a hide my email flaw going on right now that could expose some users' personal information. Now, we don't know if this has been exploited out in the wild yet. We don't know because a security researcher did not actually publish, how this is able to be exploited, but he did find that this was a flaw. And now we're seeing a lawsuit about this. So it's a class action lawsuit, and it alleges that Apple violated California's false advertising law and other consumer protection statutes by knowingly offering a feature that does not work as advertised. So I saw some people saying like, well, how can they sue if there's no damages or anything like that? But you can see here, this lawsuit is actually about false advertising because they're saying it's going to mask your email. And in this case, in this flaw, it didn't actually mask your email. So there might actually be potential here for, Apple to lose this little lawsuit here, which is pretty interesting. And it seems like this month is the month of lawsuits because we also have an update on the lawsuit with OpenAI. So we saw last week how it was big news that Apple was suing OpenAI, and it was a really big deal because basically, they would tell OpenAI would have former Apple employees come in, with Apple products and basically just, share secrets that Apple had, like trade secrets. So it's a pretty big deal. And we got an update this week from the Financial Times saying that Apple has targeted around 40 former employees with legal preservation letters, acting on its belief that the alleged misappropriation of confidential information may extend beyond the individuals named in its original complaint. And that original complaint we talked about last week, which by the way, if you missed last week's episode, please go back and watch it. It is very insane. Like it is extremely interesting, that whole story. If you just watch that story of last week's episode, just go watch that and come back to this. I'll leave a link down below. But basically two main, people were being targeted and they were mentioned in the lawsuit, but now Apple is saying there's more than just two, and there's 40 people that were named now. And the complaint also says that there are more than 400 former Apple employees that now work at OpenAI and suggests that the alleged misconduct is broader than a few isolated actions by individual employees. OpenAI has denied the allegations, saying in a statement to Bloomberg that it's not aware of any evidence that this complaint has merit. So yeah, some pretty insane stuff going on here, and it seems like Apple is really targeting these individual employees instead of OpenAI as a whole. So they're much more likely to get, something out of it by going after these employees, which honestly for Apple might be good news as well, because these people are most likely going to get fired from OpenAI after this as well. So we'll see. I mean, OpenAI is, expected to enter into the hardware space, and they're definitely going to have a lot of inspiration from Apple, on this. So we'll see where this goes from here, but it's getting pretty spicy now. And like I said, July seems to be the month of lawsuits for some reason with Apple. Okay, so now we need to talk about this loophole or this workaround that so many people have been using for so many years when they buy a new iPhone, and the fact that Apple has now fixed it. They've kind of closed this loophole. So for years now, you could go into an Apple store, an Apple retail store, and you could do carrier financing with like Verizon or T-Mobile, and you would basically get a fully unlocked phone as long as you did carrier financing. But now when you do carrier financing at the Apple Store through like Verizon or T-Mobile, your device is going to be carrier locked until it is fully paid off. And this is a much bigger deal than you might think, because the loophole was basically, that customers, and this comes from the Mobile Report, they actually put out a nice report on this, and they said that this is a bigger deal than you might think because customers have long taken advantage of this particular perk with upgrading to new iPhones because it allows you to change your SIM to a different carrier or even dual SIM for better coverage without having to pay off the device first. Doing this gave you the best of both worlds. You could take advantage of a carrier promo like $1,100 off of an iPhone at T-Mobile, for example, and also receive an unlocked device. So you can see how that would work. And I know people personally who have done this for many years and taken advantage of these carrier perks without actually having to be locked to that carrier, which kind of makes no sense. And I don't really know how this is really a loophole. It seems kind of obvious, but Apple has finally closed this after years of this existing. Okay, so let's talk about the upcoming iPads, including the upcoming iPad mini overhaul and why some people might be a little bit disappointed with it. So this comes from a new report from Mark Gurman, and he said this: Apple is preparing to introduce its biggest overhaul to the iPad mini in half a decade. The updated model will feature an OLED screen for the first time. Apple is preparing to unveil the new iPad mini as early as this fall, with a release planned by October. The presence of an OLED screen in the iPad mini has the potential to make that version even pricier. Apple is also working on an eventual OLED upgrade for the iPad Air. It's not currently working on a base iPad with OLED, instead sticking to the cheaper LCD technology for the foreseeable future. And he says that the new entry-level iPad is slated for release as early as the first calendar quarter next year. The main change will be a faster processor rather than a major design overhaul. And then for the iPad Air, he's also saying that those are coming in the spring next year as well, along with new Apple Pencils alongside the iPad Pro. But the disappointing news does not come from Mark Gurman. This comes from a separate report from Yo1122, a leaker who has kind of a mixed track record, but he's saying that the iPad mini is going to be equipped with an 8.4-inch LTPS display with a 60 hertz refresh rate. So this is pretty disappointing because we saw some rumors earlier that said we might finally get the 120 hertz ProMotion display on the iPad mini. We actually saw multiple reports about that, but according to this leaker here, that is not going to be the case. It's not even going to be 90 hertz. It looks like it's still going to be stuck at 60 hertz despite getting the new OLED display. So it seems like OLED display is going to be really the main selling feature, not necessarily the refresh rate. We also have an update on the iPhone Ultra, the upcoming foldable from Apple, and we're hearing that they are ramping up vapor chamber orders. So this comes from Chinese leaker Fixed Focus Digital, and he said that Apple has significantly increased orders for vapor chamber cooling components, and the first batch is headed to the foldable iPhone Ultra, and the second batch is coming for next year's 20th anniversary iPhone. Now, as we know, the iPhone Ultra is going to need like the maximum amount of vapor chamber cooling, like the maximum amount of cooling, because there's less internal space for the heat to go because it's a folding device. It's thin, it's folding, there's really not a lot of room in there for heat dissipation. So the vapor chamber is going to be a big key for this device. Now, Fixed Focus Digital did say previously that the foldable is going to have, quote, impressive vapor chamber cooling, and that Apple is going all out on thermal management for this device. Now, he does also mention that Apple has ramped up its foldable production target to 10 million units for 2026, which is up from an earlier forecast of 7 to 8 million. So yeah, it's looking like the vapor chamber cooling system is going to be in every high-end iPhone from here on out, including next year's big 20th anniversary iPhone. But especially in the foldable, it's going to be the most important. Now, we also need to go a little bit further and talk about the M7 chip. Now, you might be thinking like M7, we're on M5 right now, but we're actually going to see M7 next year because as we talked about previously in a previous episode, like last week or the week before, Apple is skipping the high-end Max and Ultra chips for the M6, and they're instead just going straight to M7. And we got a new report from Mark Gurman this week that mentions that the M7 Ultra chip is coming in 2028, and it's designed to support up to 1.5 terabytes of unified memory. So 1.5 terabytes of RAM in a device is crazy. Now, he does say that whether such a configuration is offered may depend on the state of the ongoing memory chip shortage. So it might not actually happen, but it is currently in testing, and that's going to be for the Mac Studio that comes out in 2028. And he goes on to say that in instead of completing the M6 family with Pro, Max, and Ultra variants, Apple is moving directly to M7. In fact, Apple started taping out the M7, the stage where it finalizes a chip's design, just 6 months after undertaking that process for the M6. That means that the M7 should arrive in the first half of next year, followed by the M7 Pro and M7 Max at the end of next year, and the M7 Ultra in 2028. And that's going to be the one with the potential for 1.5 terabytes of RAM. Okay, so now let's talk about the EU. There's always something with the EU in the news, especially when it comes to Apple. We just got a couple of news pieces this week. So number one, EU has now dropped the battery removal requirement for the Apple Watch and the AirPods. So they just removed it for them and also other wearables. They removed from its batteries regulation, which is the rule that was going to require consumer devices sold in Europe to have user swappable batteries. So 6 new product categories got exemptions this week, covering smartwatches, fitness trackers, earbuds, and smart glasses, which also includes the Meta Ray-Ban. So those are now off the hook and they do not have to have the battery removal rule right there. So this is great. And of course, the EU, it just seems like they keep making exceptions. Like we saw the iPhone get exempt from this, and it just seems like they keep making exceptions, which is kind of a good thing. And, because obviously a removable battery and something like the AirPods just doesn't really make much sense. And then we also saw this from the European Commission. So they just ordered Google to give third-party AI services the same access to Android features that Gemini has. So Google's strategy was basically to launch first and deal with the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, later, and Android users in Europe got full Gemini, while Google now has until August 1st, 2027 to implement these fixes. Now, the European Commission is demanding access to 11 specific features, including letting rival AIs respond to Hey Google, complete cross-app tasks, run background actions, and tap into the same hardware resources that Gemini uses. And this is almost identical to what they demanded of Apple, except Apple proposed a trusted system agent to let third-party AIs access device features safely, but regulators denied that. They said no, and now that's why Siri AI is not launching in the EU or China with iOS 27. And now Google's response sounds kind of like the same as Apple's. Now we also have to talk about how Apple just increased the prices of some of their services, including Apple Music and Apple One. So if you are an Apple Music subscriber, that just went up by $1. So it went from $11 to now $12 a month. That's for individuals. If you're on the family plan, it went up by $3 a month. So it's now going to be $20 a month instead of $17 a month. And also the Apple One family and Premier plans also both went up by $2 a month. We also saw Apple announce Madden NFL 27 Arcade Edition coming to Apple Arcade next month. So they said on August 6th, the most authentic NFL video game comes to Apple devices with Madden NFL 27 Arcade Edition. Designed specifically for Apple Arcade, this all-new release in the massively popular franchise lets fans live out their gridiron dreams, offering a immersive season-based experience featuring current NFL teams and realistic simulation gameplay. So if you are a fan of Madden and you have Apple Arcade, this is going to be great news for you. So anyways, let's switch over to our iPhone and continue to talk about iOS 27, which we are currently on the public beta, like I said. So let's talk about the performance and the battery life. This is going to be the same if you watched last week's video. I've not really seen anything else new here in terms of developer beta 3, aka public beta, in terms of the performance or the battery life. So like I said last week, performance and battery life are both excellent. Like look at this, I'm still sitting at 100%. I've been recording for 30 minutes. My device has not been off for 30 minutes and I'm still sitting at 100% when I'm screen recording and everything. So battery life here on beta 3, I would argue at this point is pretty much just as good as iOS 26, which is insane to say. So I don't know, it's really good right now. And like I said, since we are in a public beta, I'm more likely to recommend people to install this on their main device as long as you are still willing to accept the risks that come with a beta and knowing that things can and will break. It's just going to be more stable than the betas we've seen in the past. But so far, so good. Again, no issues with performance or battery life on my device. The only place I'm having issues is with the Apple Watch. If you've not installed the beta on your Apple Watch, in my opinion, I would still hold off on that. I would wait for this to get much better because right now it's really bad. So wait at least for one more beta for the Apple Watch before even considering installing it on your watch. But let's head over to our calendar and look at what's next here. So next up is going to be iOS 27 Developer Beta 4, aka Public Beta 2. So they're both going to be the same. They're going to have the same build number. One's just going to be for developers, one's going to be for public beta testers. So we should be seeing Developer Beta 4 next week on Monday the 20th. That's when we should see it for developers, and then we should see the public beta come out shortly after. So it could be the next day, could be 2 days later, could be a week later. We don't know, but it will come after the developer beta. And again, it will be the same thing. It's just going to be an update for public beta testers. Now keep in mind, I will be out of town for that. So I will be at the Samsung event. There's a Samsung event going on for their new foldables. So if I do end up making a video, it's going to be not in the normal, spot. So just keep that in mind and just be prepared before you ask, where's my video next week? Just know I am going to be out of town traveling for work. So we'll see what comes of that. Maybe I'll make a short. We will have to wait and see, but we should expect that next week. And then finally, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this time, a woman in England made a disturbing discovery after finding an AirTag hidden inside of the spare tire compartment of her car. So she had no idea that this AirTag was there or how long it had been there for. Now, according to prosecutors, the AirTag had been secretly placed there by her former boyfriend, a 36-year-old police officer named Jake. And this wasn't something that he just checked every now and then. Investigators say that over the course of just 1 month, he checked on the AirTag's location 668 times. That works out to more than 20 times a day he was checking on this location. And police said that he checked it while he was at work and even while he was in Germany attending the Euro 2024 final. Jake later claimed that his ex had asked him to track her for safety, but the judge was not buying that explanation. And she pointed out that if the goal was simply to keep her safe, they could have just shared their locations instead. The court also heard that Jake admitted he had become jealous after the relationship ended, and incredibly, investigators say he was still checking the AirTag's location just moments leading up to his arrest. Now, the stalker was ultimately arrested and found guilty of stalking and now faces sentencing after being suspended from his position as a police officer. So as always, like I always say, if you are in a toxic relationship currently, or if you were in one in the past, just be aware of your surroundings. Like, pay attention to those AirTags, traveling with you alerts. Take those very seriously because these jealous ex-partners can be very dangerous and you don't want them tracking your location. This is just another good example of that and how crazy some people out there can be with knowing all of your whereabouts. So scary stuff. I'm happy that she was able to find that and that he got caught. But anyways, that is the crazy AirTag story for this week. Bringing back a lot of OG things. The OG intro like last week, AirTag story, the world is right now. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this episode as always. I'm going to miss you guys next week if I don't make that video because I am going to be out traveling. We'll see. I am very curious to see about Samsung's foldables as well. I know we're all iPhone users, but it's always good to see what Samsung has in store because it gives us a kind of preview of what Apple's going to do as well in a sense. So that should be pretty exciting to see. And of course, the new betas will be out as well. But if you guys enjoyed this video and all the content in it, I would appreciate it if you let me know in a comment down below, along with any thoughts that you had. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.